Bhishtam stapitam yena bhutale swayam rupakadam mayam dadati swapadantikam vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bevacha patitanam pavanepyo vaishnavepyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhutaya Mahat Prema Paravibhur Nirmakshate Yadamusha Purusha Bhunkte Gunan Sudasa Sudasatmakai Lankrishishta Bhagavan Vachamsi Me Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So before we start, we wanted to thank Mother Radha Padaduli for organizing the program, and of course all of you for coming tonight. And I haven't been here for more than 2 years, I suppose, right? And I couldn't even immediately recognize some devotees being masked like Bal Ganesh. I was thinking, is that Bal Ganesh? Okay, good. So we have Mother Radha Padaduli. We have any suggestion for topics for tonight?
Whatever devotees need.
Okay.
Anybody has any suggestion?
Anyone wants to explore some specific topic?
The beauty of Lord Krishna.
Beauty of Lord Krishna. Wow, that's quite a topic. Okay. Then I'm wondering if Bhagavad Gita is the appropriate book for that, because it's not specifically
Chaitanya
Charitamrita, yeah, Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
But thinking of a verse maybe from the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which still speaks about Krishna's opulences, beauty.
Yeah, Barhapidam Natavarabu. Barhapidam Natavarabu.
Well, that's Bhagavatam. Anyway, we have something on the topic actually this morning we were mentioning the topic of Krishna's lotus feet, and signs on Krishna's lotus feet, and the meditation on those signs. Would you like to hear more on this topic? Yeah. Because it often says we should, take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, think of Krishna's lotus feet. So it's something which could help us in the process. Which verse we should read then on the topic? Perhaps from the 10th canto. Let's see if we have that. Anyway. Yeah, this was the verse I was thinking about. Yeah, so it's 10:14. And verse number we'll find out. Yeah, that's a good verse.
Padam Padanjali Padam Natisam.
Yeah, 14th chapter of the 10th canto is prayers by Lord Brahma. What's up, Adam? Then 1458. Samashritaye padapallava plavam mahatpadam punyayesho murare bhavam buddhirvatsa padam param padam 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 yadvipadam natesham. Translation. For those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. Their goal is Parampadam Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the California, not the place where there is danger at every step. And so this translation is taken from Srila Prabhupada's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 51. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, this verse summarizes the knowledge presented in this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna's lotus feet are described as pallava, flower buds, because they are most tender and of a pinkish hue. According to Srila Sanatana Goswami, the word pallava also indicates that Lord Krishna's lotus feet are just like desire trees which can fulfill all the desires of the Lord's pure devotee. Even exalted devotees like Sri Narada, who are themselves the great shelter for the conditioned souls in this universe, personally take shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Thus, it is natural that when Lord Krishna manifested himself as all the young boys and calves of Vrindavan, their parents were more attracted to them than previously. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure and, being all attractive, the ultimate object of everyone's love. So, Samashrita, taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, and Krishna's feet are compared to an umbrella which very wonderfully protects from all the troubles of material existence. And as we were mentioning, that the signs on the soles of Krishna's feet, 19 signs, are serving as a roadmap for our devotional development. And it's interesting that 19 signs and on Krishna's feet. Srila Prabhupada was saying that Srimad Bhagavatam, first two cantos are 2 feet of Krishna. And so first canto of Bhagavatam has 19 chapters, which correspond to the 19 signs on the soles of Krishna's feet. And second canto has 10 chapters, corresponding to 10 toes on Krishna's feet. And the late Srila Suhotra Maharaj made a research into the subject, which he haven't completed. It was very interesting how at the late stage of his life he moved. Actually, he had the desire to teach Bhagavatam, and he came to Mayapur and he stayed with His Holiness Bhakti Vidipurna Maharaj in his Gurukul, and they started doing very interesting Bhagavatam course, which I took part in. I lived in Mayapur back then, and so Maharaj got so absorbed in that he basically gave up sleeping. He was in such an ecstasy that he stopped sleeping altogether, and he was teaching this course for about a couple of years, and one day he didn't come for breakfast. He didn't come in the morning, so devotees were waiting. He lived in a kind of, not even hut, but they dug a kind of cave for him. He liked these kind of things. He stayed in the cave underground, and then they knocked at his door and there was no response. So they opened the door and they saw him, behind his table, behind his working table with open books in front of him, and with japa bead bag in his hand, and he was kind of leaning against the wall and he was sitting with his eyes closed. So devotees were thinking that perhaps he worked too much on preparing the course and then he fell asleep, dozed off. But when they came, they touched him and they realized he left his body. And the doctor said that he left his body in Brahma Muhurta. And I think it was Ekadashi, some special day, can't remember which one. And they could never ascertain the cause of death. If someone is in medical field, you might know that when doctors, they cannot really determine what is, I think Bal Ganesh would know. If doctors cannot really define why the death happened, they make they put cause of death, heart failure. Because naturally, when you die, your heart stops beating, right? So, but with the same result, they could put the diagnosis of breathing failure or something, Basically, it means, if they put heart failure, that means they don't know what happened, why the person died. So just died, heart stopped beating, okay, breathing stopped, but why the heart stopped beating, why breathing stopped, no one knows. And so he just left this world, and looks like he just left in ecstasy, being fully absorbed in Krishna. And also that but when the funeral was happening, and it was a kind of, the sky was covered with clouds, but at the moment of funeral the clouds parted and there was like a very strong ray of light coming right on Maharaj's body. Right. And it seemed like, the dark background of these, gray clouds, and then this bright yellow ray of light, like a path leading upwards, bright path. Right. So devotees were saying that was really impressive, So anyway, leaving the body in the sacred abode of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the best day, best time, in the best circumstances. He was in like huge ecstasy before that happened, because he was so happy that finally he got to do what he really dreamed of doing, like getting absorbed in Bhagavatam and teaching Bhagavatam. anyway, that this material is based on his research, which was completed by one of his disciples, Jagannatha Mishra. And so then he published Maharaj's notes with his further findings. And this is coming from this research. And as we were mentioning in this morning, that the first sign, and I could share with you that since I was coming to Mayapur, and those who are visiting Mayapur, you would remember that in front of the deities there are like, what do you call it, them plaques or something, but with the feet of all the deities, right? Radha Madhava's feet and Panchatattva's feet and all the gopis' feet, and all the signs are there for people, because especially in Bengal, visitors to the temple, they want to touch Lord's feet. So they provide this opportunity for everyone. And I was looking at these signs on the lotus feet of Radha Krishna, and I was thinking it would be good to memorize those signs, to meditate upon them, but it was pretty hard. But then Maharaj explains that these 19 signs, they correspond to the 19 chapters of the first canto, and since that I found it really easy to remember those signs, because like it's hard to memorize 19 chapters, the titles of 19 chapters. It's hard to memorize the signs on Krishna's feet, but when you put the two together, it becomes very easy. Somehow it all makes sense. Suddenly you see yoga, because yoga means connection, right? And it's very interesting that connections, that's the main thing in our lives, right? That even for developing one's intelligence, the medical science says that there are neuron connections within the brain, and so the more connections, the more of those neuron connections you have, the smarter you are. So even from that sense, the connections are everything. And connection, of course, in Sanskrit is yoga. So our whole life is yoga. And so suddenly, I found the connection, 19 chapters, 19 signs. So it all started making sense. And the first sign at the bottom of Krishna's left foot is fish. And the first chapter of the Bhagavatam is questions by the sages. And those who listen to the morning class, we were mentioning that fishes are very curious, and so inquisitiveness is first thing which helps us to advance in Krishna consciousness. That's why the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is questions and answers. There are 6 original questions in the first chapter of Bhagavatam, and then everything else is just an expansion of those first 6 questions. But the entire Bhagavatam is a conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. Interestingly enough, there are no classes. No one ever gave classes, right? It was free-flowing discussion, because unless we are interested in the subject, we're not going to learn anything. It will just go right above our heads. And that's why Taspat Gurum Prapadita Jigyasu She Uttamam Shabde Parishnata. And last line.
Satyam Brahmanishta.
Yeah. Samashaya something. We have to be Jigyasu. We have to be inquisitive. in order to advance in Krishna consciousness and ask questions. That's the purpose of accepting Guru, that we ask questions trying to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. And then above the fish sign there is half moon, and also this is because I'm kind of involved with interfaith. So if some of you know the history of Christianity, the original sign of Christianity is fish, right? Because I think it was an abbreviation of Jesus, of the name of Jesus, which in Latin or Greek language meant Latin, I think, meant fish, like that. So it was a secret word for referring to Jesus Christ. And so you can still see some Christians, they use the sign of the fish because it's the original sign of Christians. And of course, Jesus was preaching to fishermen, and he was telling them that you were catching fish, but I'll teach you how to catch humans, right? By preaching. And so, and then above the fish is half moon, and of course, half moon is very prominent Islamic symbol. And half moon is also on Lord Shiva's head, and so that's an indication that even great devotees such as Lord Shiva, they bow down to Lord Krishna's lotus feet in supplication, what to speak of everyone else. So they show the example. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Krishna consciousness is so highly appreciated by the greatest personalities, Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the acharyas, Goswamis, so many great people. And some of these personalities, like Jiva Goswami, for example, Rupa Goswami, their works are studied all over the planet. And they are accepted as great, eminent scholars by everyone. And so they are all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and worshipped him. And so it's interesting that some people disregard that fact and they cannot accept Krishna as the Supreme Lord. But obviously it's just original sign of envy that people don't want to accept Krishna. But yes, bowing down to Krishna and surrendering unto Krishna and engaging ourselves in devotional service of Krishna, that's real purpose of human life. And moon is giving light, so by this process we become enlightened in Krishna consciousness. And of course not completely, not immediately from the start. It kind of takes time to become enlightened. That's why it's not a full moon, it's half moon. Just new moon, right? The process of enlightenment begins once you become inquisitive, once you start putting forward relevant questions, then your process of enlightenment starts. And the second chapter of the Bhagavatam, first canto, is Divinity and Divine Service. And it's a very exciting chapter. I don't know about you, but when I first started reading Bhagavatam, it just blew my mind. So many powerful principles are explained in this second chapter. second chapter of Bhagavatam is very similar to the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, because second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita. So the second chapter of Bhagavatam is summary of the whole process of devotional service. And then third chapter is, of course, the summary of all Krishna's pastimes. So, second chapter is dealing with tattva, and third chapter is dealing with lila specifically. And there are so many Krishna avatars are described, and the third chapter is, of course, Krishna, the source of all incarnations, and the sign, which is, there is fish, then crescent moon, and then above is a triangle. That's the left foot. Close to the middle of the left foot, there is a triangle. And triangle is very interesting sign, because one of Krishna's names is Trayadish. Isha, Trayadisha. Isha, of course, refers to the Lord or controller, Ishvara. But Traya in Sanskrit refers to triad. There are triads. Triad means anything with the category of three, right? These are triads. So Krishna is the master of all triads. Anyone can think of example of any triads which Krishna is the Lord and master of? Three modes of material nature. Anything else?
Three planetary systems.
3 levels of planetary systems, yes. 3 phases of time, present, past, present, future. Then?
Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva.
Yeah, Trimurti, Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, 3 main controllers of this world. Anything else?
Sambandha, Videya, Prayojana.
Yeah, 3 stages of devotional development: Sambandha, Videya, Prayojana. Any other categories?
The three demigods.
Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, already mentioned, yes.
3 modes of material nature.
3 modes of material nature already mentioned. One important thing is that 3
steps of Vamana.
huh?
Vamana.
Yeah.
3 steps. 3 steps of Vamana. That's interesting, yes. Haven't thought of that. That's a good one. But the one which is really important is, 3 spiritual energies. 3, we, in this material world we have material energies, 3 modes of material energies, but in the spiritual world we have 3 spiritual energies, right? Satchitananda. We are Satchitananda, and Supreme Lord is also Satchitananda.
And a spiritual world 3 times more than material world.
Okay, yes. Spiritual world is Tripad Vibhuti as opposed to material world, Ekapad Vibhuti. So you can see that it's not by chance that one of Krishna's names is Trayadish, the master of the 3s of the triads, because there are so many triads which Krishna is the master of. And so Krishna is described, because all these incarnations have been described in the 3rd chapter, but then the Paribhasa Sutra of Srimad Bhagavatam, the key verse which indicates the purpose of the entire text, is given in the 3rd chapter. I think it's 28. Etecham Shakala Pumsam, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayan Yuge Yuge. So, Yeah.
So in Christianity, also in Sufism and many other interfaith traditions, apparently this law of three is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in Sufism, you are in the heart, and then these two forces from the top and down are trying to master you.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the other trees which are mentioned in other texts, other than this context.
Of course, yeah. Christianity means Trinity, right? Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Yeah. Holy Spirit. And I was also thinking of Jagannatha, Baladev, and Subhadra, which are probably some of you might heard of it, the oldest and apparently the only interfaith deities in the world. Why is it so? Because Jagannath is worshipped by everybody. Like original worship of Jagannath was by Shabaras, right? And tribal people. And tribal people still consider Jagannath to be their god. You can see that tribal people all over the world, they worship wooden deities. Like, Red Indians, they would worship wooden deities, right? So, tribal culture is to worship wooden deities. Even in Russia, they do that. And so, then, of course, Vaishnavas worship Jagannath. But then Jagannath also has Muslim devotees like Salabega and others, who for them Jagannath is Allah, and Jagannath is worshipped by Sikh community because Guru Nanak, he came to Jagannath Puri, which of course is very important place, not only for Vaishnavas but for everybody, because it's one of the char dhamas in India, right? Where Shankaracharya established one of his 4 headquarters, that north, south, east, west. So eastern headquarters of Shankara Sampradaya is in Jagannath Puri. Funny enough, it's called Govardhan Mat. And so, for Mayavadis, Jagannath is the topmost manifestation of Brahman because Shankaracharya himself established standards. But Buddhists, they worship Lord Jagannath as well, because Buddhists, they, there are even rumors, we don't know, but the Brahman, which is transferred from the old deity to the new deity, they say it's Buddha's relic. Some say it's Buddha's tooth wrapped in some cloth. But why for Buddhists Jagannath is so important? And of course Jagannath is also 3, right? Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, because they consider Jagannath to be the manifestation of 3 topmost fundamental truths in Buddhism. Anyone heard what are they? Maybe someone was in touch with Buddhist philosophy and practices before Krishna consciousness, then you would know the 3 most important truths in Buddhism. I think they are also important for us because they are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, for them personify Buddha. I think Buddha for them is Jagannath, then Dharma is Baladev, and Sangha is Subhadra. So, and of course there is a history of Jesus Christ, staying in Jagannath Puri and apparently starting his great mission from being in Jagannath temple. So somehow Jagannath unites all traditions of the planet.
So he's rightly called as Jagannatha.
Huh?
He's rightly called as Jagannatha.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. Everybody except Jagannath.
So the atheists will be included with the Shankaracharya and the Buddhists.
Pretty close. Yeah. Pretty close, yes. So anyway, yes, definitely the 3 is very important number in not only in our tradition but in any sacred tradition of the world. So yeah, the Lord is Triadish, the Lord of the triads or trees. Threes. Then chapter 4.
Even also like circumambulation also we do 3 times.
Yes. Then chapter 4 is 4 pots which are around the triangle. And it's very interesting chapter because it is describing how Srila Vyasadev came up with, he started editing Bhagavatam, because Vyasa, the very word is actually, the meaning of the word is editor. And then he divided one single Veda into 4, right? And then he kind of, divided everything into categories. Actually, Vyasa means to separate, to divide. So he divided Veda, because it was all in one, but it was really hard for people to figure out. So he systematized Vedic knowledge in this way, right? Rig, Sama, Yajura, Dharva. So he divided everything into categories, and then he wrote Puranas to kind of as purpose or commentaries on the Vedas and other scriptures like Itihasa, Mahabharata, and then he assigned different disciples to take charge of these different branches. So he made massive work trying to make Vedas easily understandable and relevant for people. And then, as we know, he was still unsatisfied. Sitting in front of these 4 pots of nectar. He was still unsatisfied. And he was thinking, why am I so unhappy? I supposed to celebrate, right? That I achieved my goal. I did everything I wanted, but I'm still not happy. And then he's kind of thinking that maybe it's because I failed to specifically glorify the Supreme Lord. I didn't produce a scripture for the glorification of the Supreme Lord. And then who comes? Narada Muni appears on the scene, right? He's Vyasadeva's guru. And then he confirms that yes, it is true, that you're supposed to write something specifically to glorify the Supreme Lord, then you'll be happy. And the four pots, if you observed the ingredients of yagya, what's on the corners of the yagya pit, 4 pots, right? Mm-hmm. And what the 4 pots signify? 4 Vedas.
Yeah.
And so, but what is the meaning of the Vedas? What is the purpose of the Vedas? Vedas are directing people to do yagyas, and yagya, the ultimate purpose of yagya, is to act for the Lord's pleasure. Any activity which is meant for the Lord's pleasure is called yagya. And then next question is, what is the topmost yagya of all? Anyone can tell us? Sankirtan yagya. And who is the topmost Sankirtan devotee in the universe? Well, he is the Supreme Lord, but who is the topmost devotee in the universe? Narad Muni. So you see the connection? 4 pots, yagya, and the topmost performer of yagya, Narad Muni, right? So that's chapter 4. It's interesting, right? That chapter 3 is triangle, chapter 4, 4 pots. A lot of interesting, so-called coincidences.
Maharaj, when you say Srila Vyasadeva divided it 1 to 4, are you mentioning also that the 4 Vedas, the 4 is not, the Vedas were not originally created by Vishnu by 4, or it's just a number that Vyasadeva created?
Well, it was all put in one. It was all Veda was one, but then he divided. He's basically divided into categories, etc., to make to help people understand it in much easier. Because when people are smart, they don't need simplifications. Like I came across one book written by a Sanskrit scholar. It's very powerful book, very important book, and it's on Radharani, written by a Sanskrit scholar, and the book is called Radha, the Secret Goddess Demystified. And basically the purpose of the book is to prove or to oppose the multiple claims which are actually winning at the moment, because we're kind of living in our own little Hare Krishna bubble, as my Guru Maharaj says. We don't know what the people say outside, but majority of people are saying that Srimati Radharani does not exist. Can you imagine that? Krishna exists, but not Srimati Radharani. That Radharani is fictitious character promoted by Jayadev Goswami, but before him no one ever heard of Radha. So Krishna is there, but Radha is not there. Can you imagine that? And I think that's the ultimate Apa Radha, right? Ultimate offense against Radharani, You can say so many bad things about the person or to the person, but I think the ultimate offense is to say that you do not exist at all, right? So, and there are like continuous attacks for many, many years on our sampradaya that we are not bona fide because we made up Radha, and Radha does not exist, and of course it's very disturbing. But Srila Prabhupada does not speak much about the Vedic original texts about Radharani. That's why some people say that there are no Vedic what do you call it? Vedic
references.
Yeah, Vedic references on Radha. Besides very few in latest Puranas, which are not really authoritative, etc. But then this scholar, he came up with mind-blowing, volume of the references to the original Vedas, to all 4 Vedas, original Vedas and Upanishads and whatnot. This book is thick like that. And I was thinking this is the treasure, the treasure chest, which could, silence all the critics and shut them up so that they would not dare to say that Radha is not in the Vedas. But because this man is a scholar and, he knows Sanskrit better than we know English, there are many verses which he doesn't even bother to translate. He just says, okay, this is it, this is that, like whole bunch of references with no translations. And it's, just not even Roman transliteration, it's just straight in Devanagari. Half of the book is just Devanagari references. And I'm like, it's like this, trying to lick the jar of honey from outside. It's nice, but I cannot figure it out. So then I had to approach, scholars, our Sanskrit scholars. Can you help me out? Because it's so valuable. But the guy, because he's a scientist, he's thinking everybody is a scientist, and so because everybody perceives reality through the lens of his own conditioning, right? So. But for layman like myself, we need translations to understand at least Roman transliteration, if anything else.
Does he identify himself with any particular sampradaya, or he is an independent researcher?
Definitely a Vaishnava, not exactly sure which sampradaya, haven't checked, but he is from South Indian Vaishnava. But very prominent scholar. On a national level in India. So that also adds credibility to his work. And he made amazing amount of research. I mean, the number of references to the books of other scholars is just mind-blowing. I was just giving this example to illustrate that scholars, they don't need to simplify things, that they can just speak their own language, but how many people can understand them? And so, in the past, all the people were smart enough to, they didn't need simplifications. Even the books they didn't need. But as Kali Yuga progresses, people becoming less and less smart, so they need simplifications. It's like I came across the joke that, how things are advancing through Kali Yuga, that the original question was, what is the meaning of life, right? Some philosopher put forward this question. Then little bit further down the road, a couple of centuries later, people are asking, what's the meaning? Just life dropped out, what's the meaning? And then few centuries down the line, there is one famous rap singer, and his very famous, saying is, what? So from what is the meaning of life came down to what's the meaning, then came out down to what?
Everything's short.
Yeah. So, kind of progress of stupidity, we can say. So unfortunately, this is the influence of Kali Yuga. So people need, clarify and clarification and simplification as much as possible. Huh?
It's a degradation, but we say it's advancement.
Advance to the level of what?
So Maharaj, these 4 pots in the fire sacrifice, does it mean that it just appeared or added to the ceremony after Vyasadev's time? Because that didn't have any meaning before that time, if we assume that.
Well, we cannot say at least I wouldn't know that where and when it was described, all these ingredients. So
The Vedas are eternal. The Vedas are eternal, and these teachings are there in different times.
Yeah, Vedas are eternal, but the presentation of the Vedas is different depending on the age, more complex or more simplified. because people of Kali Yuga, they cannot perform all these complicated sacrifices. For them, it's like you just chant, don't worry about anything else. That's good enough. And so, then chapter 5 is basically Narada instructs Vyasadeva on Srimad Bhagavatam, and this sign which is connected to that is exactly what the verse was talking about, the calf's hoof print, which is on Krishna's foot. And of course it indicates how much Krishna loves cows and calves, but also it is indicated by this verse that Samashritaya Padapalaplavam. If someone takes shelter of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet, then one can easily cross the ocean of material existence in the same way as one can step over the hoof print of a calf. And the Lord's feet are compared to a boat. And it's very interesting how it happens that acharyas are also explaining that you come to this great insurmountable ocean of material existence and you think how to cross it over, and then you see the boat of the Lord's lotus feet on the shore, and then you climb up that boat, and suddenly you realize that the entire ocean of material existence shrinks to the size of a water left in a calf's hoof print. This is how amazing it is. One time, I think this was the very first time when Srila Prabhupada was taking a flight from New York to San Francisco. Before that, he never had experience. And then I think he was with Karandar Prabhu. And so he sat next to the window. He wanted to sit at the window and see what's happening, when the plane takes off. And he was like a child, looking down when the plane started going up. And he looked at Karandar and he said, "Look, that everything looks like toys, all the houses and cars, and you cannot see the people from such a height." And he was very excited about that. And Karandar was thinking, like, he's supposed to be a saint, why he is excited like a child about these things. But then Srila Prabhupada immediately added Krishna conscious perspective. He said, if it looks so small and insignificant for us from the plane, just imagine how everything looks from Krishna's viewpoint. And apparently this is what's happening. You take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet and then you take off. And then the entire ocean of material existence doesn't look like more than the water contained in the calf's footprint. So we rise above the trifles of the material world once we take shelter of the Lord's feet. And so, hence is the sign. And this whole chapter is actually describing the glories of the Lord and what devotional service can do to the person, which hopefully all of us have first-hand experience, how powerful devotional service is, even though it seems to be like a very simple thing and actually doesn't make sense to people, right? That you just repeat over and over 3 words, Hare Krishna Rama, for hours together. And instead of, putting butter on your bread, you burn butter in the fire and do other apparently meaningless things and dedicate your whole life to this. And, people might be, and, Patri, who's just been here a few days ago, he also added some other, perspective. He said, if people look at the devotees, what are they doing? Playing dolls and playing with stones. Dolls and stones. It's whole life, like repeat 3 words, play with dolls, play with stones, burn some fire, some butter in the fire, and do other similar things, and dedicate the whole life to these procedures. And then go out and sell books which people have hard time to understand, so that they could also join the process. So from the point of view of logic and common sense, what we're all doing is strange, to say the least. But funny thing, it works. And I think the fact that it works, even though it's not supposed to work, because from material point of view we're not doing anything of meaningful at all. Right? But it works, and I think this is one of the biggest proofs of existence of God.
That is a magic.
Yeah, magic of Krishna consciousness. So anyway, back to Krishna's foot, and we are still on the left foot yet, haven't left it yet, and sticking to the left foot. And the next chapter is very powerful, and it's called Conversation between Narayan and Vyasadev. But the essence of this conversation, after in the previous chapter, Narad Muni described the glories of devotional service. Then in this particular chapter 6, he narrates his own story, how he became a devotee. And I think for many devotees, often that's the most interesting thing in our Krishna consciousness, how different devotees come to Krishna consciousness. How many of you like to hear those stories? How people come to Krishna consciousness? Because you can really see Krishna's hand in it, right? Krishna's magic, as Shyama Sundara Prabhu likes to say. And in case of Narad Muni, it was really amazing. And actually the sign for this chapter, the sign number 6, is a bow, but it doesn't have a string. But it's still bent, even though it doesn't have a string. So can the bow be bent with no string on it? Is it possible? No. But this bow is still bent. Why? Because string is there. Unseen string. So in the same way as there is an unseen string on this bow, in the same way Krishna is the unseen cause of everything which is happening in devotees' lives.
Similar to a garland or a necklace, you don't see the string, but you see the...
Yeah, you cannot see the thread, but it's there, yes. And that's why they say that atheist is the one which doesn't have invisible support in life. Right? So, but yeah, it's really amazing how Krishna is acting in devotees' lives as unseen cause of everything. And advancement in Krishna consciousness is to recognize that unseen cause. And then
he also says in Bhagavad Gita too, right? Everything is strung to the thread like pearls. Yeah.
Yes. And then chapter 7 is in reality the very first chapter of Bhagavatam, because from this point onward Vyasadev started describing, all the 6 chapters were prelude to Bhagavatam, but then from chapter 7, which is called the son of the Drona punished, how Ashwatham murdered 5 sons of Pandavas, and then Arjuna caught him and wanted to, execute him, but then he brought him to Draupadi, and then Draupadi forgave him for killing all his sons. And the sign, number 7, is conch. And of course, conch is the sign of victory. So externally, Krishna is always victorious. Devotees are always victorious by the mercy of Krishna. So externally, we might take it, Arjuna emerged victorious in the fight with Ashwathama, arrested him, brought him to Draupadi. But there is much greater victory there described in the chapter than just external victory. And what is the greatest victory? Compassion of the devotee and forgiveness. Can you imagine? If you're a parent, especially mother, and someone murders not just one but all your children, and you're forgiving the murderer, it's unbelievable, right? But then Draupadi forgives Ashwathama, and then he gets released. And then chapter 8 is the famous prayers of Queen Kunti and Parikshit saved. So these 2 events are happening in this chapter, and basically the sign for this chapter is 2 concentric circles within each other, and that is the sign of Akash. And Akash is the sign of ether. Akash means ether in English. And so, of course, Krishna is like ether. He is all pervading. He is inside, he is outside, because ether is everywhere. Even if there is no air, ether is still there. But it's illustrated in these chapters how he is present inside and outside. From outside, he reciprocates with Kunti, he hears her prayers, he talks with Kunti and accepts her devotion. But then Uttara comes asking Krishna to save her because Ashwathama, it's interesting that Draupadi forgave Ashwathama for murdering her sons, but Ashwathama never improved, never stopped, and he decided to kill the last descendant of Pandavas, Maharaj Parikshit, who was still in the womb of Uttara. And so he sent Brahmastra, and Uttara came running to Krishna asking for his protection. And then Krishna is entering into Uttara's womb, and even though Maharaj Parikshit was already burnt by Brahmastra, he restores his body. And Maharaj Parikshit takes birth as the last descendant of the Pandavas. So like that. It will take longer to go through the right foot, but I suppose you got you got the taste of it. So, but it's really amazing, because if you meditate like that, you can learn to connect the signs and both chapters of Bhagavatam to your own lives. and you can see how Krishna is acting in our lives, because Krishna is acting in the same way with everyone, everywhere. Doesn't matter who we are and where we live. Krishna is still, his character doesn't change. His views do not change. His purposes remain the same. So it's really interesting. Anyway, I hope it was relevant for at least most of you.
Maharaj,
Yes.
you said like Narada, Vyasadeva was not satisfied after writing so many scriptures. But did he get that he didn't write about the glories of Krishna, that's what he was not satisfied? Or Narada Muni tells, because he comes and he says I'm not satisfied, and then Narada Muni says, yeah, you are not satisfied because you didn't describe about the glories of Krishna. Is it like Narada Muni tells, or he realizes himself and then Narada Muni confirms that?
Yes, first Vyasadeva was thinking that perhaps this is the cause that I haven't glorified the Lord, and then Narada Muni comes. It's very interesting culturally for us to study the perfect disciple and perfect guru. First of all, perfect disciple comes to the conclusions himself because Paramatma is telling him from within the heart, and then perfect guru confirms only when disciple asks guru, because it's very powerful that Vyasadeva says, please find deficiency in me, and then Narada Muni points out at the deficiency, which makes sense, because unless we want to be corrected, there is no there is no point of correcting that. As we know, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, right? So if we're not willing to understand something, there is no point. That's why Srila Prabhupada says that sadhus are sometimes speaking and sometimes are silent. And disciple asked, it's understood that sadhus are speaking, but why are they silent sometimes? And Prabhupada's response was, because sadhus are not obliged to anybody. So basically speaking, if people are not ready to hear the truth, sadhu will not waste his bullets, so to speak, right? Trying to convince someone who is not interested. Or, as Sachitananda Prabhu would tell you on book distribution, if you feel that person is not interested, you will not be wasting your time trying to convince, you'll move on, right? To someone who is more willing. Because
every day, that happens.
Huh?
That happens every day.
Yeah. Yeah, because why waste time with someone unwilling, and meanwhile 10 willing people passing by? So it's just common sense logic. So gurus are acting in the same way. If someone is willing, they are investing. If not, then that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
And even that eighth one, it indicates the sign also like womb. The
Sorry?
Two circles.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Traditionally, we usually hear from previous acharyas some comments, and then we follow this. I'm just curious. This is the first time I hear it. I'm fascinated with hearing all these analogies that fit the description of every chapter. Is Maharaja Subhadra Swami, did he actually was based all his research in some previous information like that, or it was just his own?
I think it's both. Certain things were Shastra based, but there are many things which were his realizations. But according to Srila Prabhupada, it is allowed because there are philosophical speculations and there are philosophical realizations. And speculation means it is something which goes against the principles, against the Siddhanta, but realization is something in line with Siddhanta.
So there is a book which Maharaj, the disciple, has published with
Yeah.
all signs.
Well, yeah, I have that, but I think it's not easily available because it's been published quite some time back, and I don't think there is any reprint.
So you
Of
would
the
have
book.
a soft copy and a hard copy.
I have in Russia.
Oh,
All right. So, yes.
Do the symbols on Radharani's feet correspond to any book?
It's very interesting question. Yes, actually, this book is describing all 12 cantos of Bhagavatam,
oh.
and so, Canto 6 is central canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is corresponding to chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita, because chapter 9 is the central chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the most confidential knowledge. And so chapter 6 is very confidential chapter in Bhagavatam because it describes unlimited the power of Bhakti. Starts with the history of Ajamil, and also the story of Vritrasura is there, So, and it also has 19 chapters, six canto, and there are also 19 signs on Radharani's feet, and basically, yes, Canto 6 is Krishna's heart, and in Krishna's heart there are Radharani's feet, and so, and again, the 19 chapters of the 6th canto corresponding to 19 signs on Radharani's feet.
So that book is not available, you said.
No.
It's more and more interesting.
Yeah.
It's such a really wonderful meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really wonderful. I always wanted to know why this circle, why this, the barley corn, all, I knew there was something, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah. There are some descriptions, but yeah, probably this is the most elaborate analysis I ever came across. All right, so thank you very much. Of course, the main guest of honor tonight, Mother Radha Paduduli, invited is Giriraj Govardhan.
Yes.
So she made elaborate arrangements for him, and she also suggested that if someone wants to bring gifts for devotees, right?
Yeah, we
For
have them, yeah.
other
Gift
devotees,
exchange,
yeah, a gift exchange, which I was thinking is a brilliant idea because it's part of the loving exchanges recommended by Rupa Goswami in Upadishamrita, Dadati Pratigrinati Guhyamakhyati Prichati Bhunkte Bhajayate Chaiva Shadvitham Priti Lakshanam. That 6 types of loving exchanges. First one is Dadati Pratigrinati, giving gifts and accepting gifts, and then Guhyamakhyati Prichati, sharing confidential topics and listening to confidential topics, and Bhunkte Bhajayate Chaiva, then giving prasadam and taking prasadam. So Shadvidya Priti Lakshanam, that these are 6 loving exchanges amongst the devotees. And I was thinking this is a brilliant idea, and I also wanted to take part in this, and I have little gifts for all of you. And let me see. Yeah, it's there. And that is Lakshmi Yantra. That's Vastu Yantra. Basically, it says if you keep it on you or in your house, that would bring prosperity. And it's coming from Vrindavan. It says that it's gold plated, so everyone can have one for yourself. So yeah,